Hello and welcome to The Perspective. I'm your host Rafae Iqbal, and in today's show we'll be talking about some very important developments that we've been seeing over the past week. Of course, I'm talking about the United Nations General Assembly. Its 79th session was underway, and of course we saw that it was a very happening week on Pakistan's diplomatic front, and of course a very successful week in that regard as well. Of course, we know Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif addressed the 79th session of the United Nations General Assembly, and it was an address that was a very comprehensive and a very well elaborated one, and of course it touched upon some very important topics that are being faced by the world, and of course being faced by Pakistan and different regions of the world. And it was a very responsible and a very touching speech, as it concerned the different issues that are of key concern in the world at the moment. The Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, he talked about the plight of the Palestinians and the Kashmiri people at the hands of the oppressors. In that regard, he condemned Israeli and Indian aggression, and the Prime Minister called for Palestine to be admitted as a permanent member of the United Nations, and emphasized on the two-state solution as well, with the Al-Quds Al-Sharif as the eternal capital of Palestine. Regarding India, Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif highlighted that India has been violating the United Nations Security Council resolutions and condemned India's unilateral actions of 5th of August 2019 with regards to the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A, and of course the atrocities that India has been committing against the innocent people of Jammu and Kashmir, as they've been struggling for their right to self-determination. The Prime Minister also highlighted that just like the people of Palestine, where they are facing injustices, they're facing genocide at the hands of the oppressors, the people of occupied Jammu and Kashmir, they're also facing the same kind of systematic genocide by India. With regards to that, the Prime Minister also highlighted Pakistan's war on terror and how Pakistan has been consistently putting in efforts to eradicate this scourge, not only for the betterment of Pakistan but for the betterment of the region and the world at large. And he also highlighted Pakistan's sacrifices in the war against terror. In regards to that and the topic of terrorism, the Prime Minister highlighted and of course reiterated on the Afghan interim government as well as how Afghan soil has been being used by the militant groups to carry out their nefarious designs in neighborly countries, and of course carry out cross-border terrorism as well. And the Prime Minister highlighted how the Afghan interim government needs to take action against these militant groups for the betterment, for the collective peace of not just Pakistan and Afghanistan, but for the wider region as well. In regards to Afghanistan, the Prime Minister also shed light on how there needs to be an inclusive approach by the Taliban regime, and he talked about how there needs to be women inclusivity in the political process in Afghanistan as well. With regards to inclusivity, the Prime Minister also talked about equitable development and how there needs to be climate change and how the issue of climate change needs to be addressed, as it is a global phenomena and there's developing countries in the world which are facing the brink of the adverse effects of climate change. And of course, in that regard, the Prime Minister mentioned that Pakistan, being less than 1% of the global carbon emissions, is facing the brink of the climate catastrophes. And he also made reference to the 2022 floods, in which Pakistan suffered losses of around $30 billion, even though Pakistan contributes less than 1% of the global carbon emissions. The Prime Minister also talked about the rising issue of Islamophobia. As we've seen in the world, there's a rising tide, and of course we've also seen incidents even in the European countries, in the Western countries, and how there's an increased rate in these incidents. With regards to that, we've also seen the recent riots happening in the United Kingdom. We've seen the desecration of the Holy Quran. There were incidents of that in different European countries as well, and the Prime Minister highlighted as it's a key issue concerning not just Pakistan but the Muslim world at large. And the Prime Minister also touched upon other issues of interest, such as the Ukraine war, the African countries and the crisis prevailing there, and the Prime Minister, the most important part of his speech, which was the call for access to justice and peace, in which the Prime Minister reiterated that the weak are not voiceless, and we've been talking about this in our earlier shows as well. We talked about this yesterday as well, as how the Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif has become the voice of the weak, not just in Pakistan, in different parts of the world. Wherever there's people being oppressed, Pakistan has become the voice of those people. With regards to that, we'll be talking about the different aspects regarding the Prime Minister's address at the United Nations General Assembly, and of course the different aspects that the Prime Minister highlighted. In the studios, we've been joined by Analyst Wajih Abbasi. Along with that, we've been joined on Skype by Javed Jadoon, senior journalist, and Dr. Salma Malik, a foreign affairs expert. Thank you all for your time and being part of the conversation. I'll start off from Mr. Javed Jadoon regarding Prime Minister's address at the United Nations General Assembly. Sir, how would you comment on the speech, as it covered different areas, it covered a vast array of topics and issues, and that not just concern Pakistan but the world at large?
Yes, thank you very much. I think the speech was quite wide-ranging, but most importantly, what you talked about, the situation in the Middle East, particularly what is happening in Gaza and now what is happening in Lebanon. And events have started taking over pretty fast, as what happened last night. The supreme leader of Hezbollah was martyred in an Israeli airstrike. And the apprehensions are now definitely growing that it could become a regional conflict and many other countries could be sucked into it. And the Prime Minister rightly pointed out the plight of the Gazans, how the children are being martyred and they are buried under the debris. And he equated this situation with occupied Kashmir as well. But I think now, most importantly, the first topic which the Prime Minister took was the aggravation in the Middle Eastern situation and how Israel is flaunting all international laws and carrying out the kind of genocide in Gaza, and now striking even civilians in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon as well. In one such strike, the supreme leader, Ahsan Iqbal, was martyred. And now I think there are quite, apprehensions are quite growing that Iran could retaliate in some way or the other. And this is what the Prime Minister was talking about. He was trying to sensitize the global community that you need to pay heed to what is happening in the Middle East, because he definitely feared that if this conflict goes on, it could suck in many other countries, especially Iran, or even Yemen is already there. And Lebanon is definitely being devastated by Israeli airstrikes and long-range missiles as well. So I think the Prime Minister's concern was quite serious as far as the genocide of the Gazans is concerned. And of course, the way children, the women are being massacred without any discrimination is kind of a Holocaust we have never seen before. People have talked about Holocaust in Germany, in Nazi Germany, but same is being repeated in Gaza. And there's not a single country in the civilized world which is talking about the kind of genocide going on unabated. And Israel is carrying out its war crimes as well. Even the medicines are not being allowed to get into Gaza. And most unfortunately, the Arab countries surrounding Gaza are not able to even provide humanitarian aid to the Gazans. Even Egypt is not able to send in medicines or food supplies through Rafae crossing. This is the most unfortunate part of it. They're quite tight-lipped. What has happened in Lebanon, the killing of Hassan Nasrallah, not a single statement has come out from the Arab capitals. I think this is the way how situation is deteriorating, and Prime Minister definitely knew that if it goes on unabated, it could be a serious threat, not only to the region's peace, but the global peace as well. Because now we can definitely foresee what is going to happen. Iran is not going to sit back. The Iranians may not strike directly. They could use the axis of resistance, which includes the Yemenis and the Hezbollah and Hamas as well. So I think quite a serious situation. On the contrary, America, which continues to supply lethal weapons to Israel, I think that was also one of the audience of Prime Minister's speech, that the global community in general, but America in particular, and its Western allies as well, they need to realize that if they don't stop supplying weapons to Israel, if they don't put pressure, for example, the French, they started proposing 21 days ceasefire over there. And what happened was the reaction was so stern and so blatant on part of the Israeli prime minister. He outrightly rejected any kind of a ceasefire over there. And then there's a deafening silence on part of the Americans and their allies in the European continent. So I think Prime Minister's main concern was what is going on in Middle East. And then he talked about Kashmir as well. More as the same situation goes on over there, how the Kashmiris are being targeted and how their human rights are being violated. As you pointed out in your intro as well, the abrogation of Article 370 and 35A is a vindication of Prime Minister's concern that the basic human rights have been usurped. The valley has been turned into a huge prison camp. There are no fundamental rights of the Kashmiris. Even these sham elections were held over there. And the purpose was to manipulate those elections in their own favor and put in a puppet regime in the occupied valley as well. He talked about climate change as well. And he also talked about the debt issue, which is Pakistan also facing. It's a quite serious issue as far as Pakistan is concerned.
Definitely, Mr. Javed Jadoon will also touch upon those topics. But before that, I'd like to move towards Dr. Salma Malik with regards to the Palestine and Kashmir issue and, of course, the Prime Minister's address at the United Nations General Assembly with regards to that. Dr. Salma, as we've seen, the attacks in Lebanon, they came at a time when the United Nations General Assembly was underway, when the whole world community was gathering there. And to obviously, it was what the Palestine issue was on the main agenda of a lot of countries. And of course, we also saw as Prime Minister Netanyahu, he started his address at the United Nations General Assembly. There was a walkout led by Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, followed by a lot of other Arab and Islamic countries. With regards to that, how do you comment on Israel's ignorance of these international calls to halt its actions and its ignorance for these calls and going on with its genocidal aggression?
Thank you so much for giving me the space to speak. Well, basically, I don't think this is ignorance on part of Israel. It is a blatant violation of United Nations and the very platform which every country is using to voice its concern over the blatant disregard of human rights, the genocidal activities which are underfoot by Israel in Palestine, and they're expanding horizontally as well as vertically the escalation of conflict to the point that they took the war to Lebanon, and of course they have credible intelligence, which has resulted in the death and the martyrdom of Hassan Nasrallah. But at the same time, what we need to understand is that Israel is very effectively using the UN forum to voice its concern. Many of us, including our country, rather spearheaded by our country and our Prime Minister, the audience walked out from his address, but that did not stop him from doing what he had to do. So he is, number one, manipulating the UN system. Number two, he's using that forum to voice whatever Israel's opinion is and using it as a sound box to inform the world what its intent is. And at the same time, thirdly, it carries out these distardedly actions, strikes in Lebanon, and he has actually done this effort so to hammer the point home that UN is just a mockery. We will totally disregard anything when it comes to our selfish interests. And we don't really think that the UN has the capacity or the teeth, or any of the countries in the UN have the capacity to stop us from undertaking any kind of blatant violations that we want to undertake. And they have actually done that and gotten away with it. I absolutely respect, and I think it was wonderful on part of Pakistani leadership that we walked out of the address and many people followed. But did that really stop the Israelis from doing or saying what they wanted to do? Unfortunately, it did not, which also kind of shows the weakness of the international system, that despite so many countries openly siding with Palestine, openly talking about the genocidal activities that Israel is undertaking, openly talking about so many human rights aspects, children being killed, food not being available to the people, no humanitarian assistance, and so many things that have been highlighted and has been talked about during all these deliberations. But what could they do? They could not prevent Lebanon. They could not prevent the type of killings that have happened. And Israel remains as defiant and as adamant in doing whatever it wants. And it knows that it can very well escape any kind of punitive action, any kind of sanctions that would have fallen to any other country had it not been Israel, because it has a complete US support to it. And it also has the European country support, because they require Israel's help also into countering the Russian-Ukrainian front as well. So it's a very complex interplay of how these dynamics are working. But unfortunately, the incidents in Lebanon actually very, very crudely pinpoint to the fact that Israel has manipulated the UN system, and it knows how weak and fragile the UN system has become, and it can be easily exploited, and it did that
Well,
and got
definitely.
away with it.
Well, definitely, of course, these are points that the international community needs to focus on and emphasize on with regards to the heightened tensions in the world. I'll move and include Wajih Abbasi in the conversation as well with regards to what we've seen in the world. The Prime Minister also mentioned the rising tide of Islamophobia. We've already seen there's so many heightened tensions going on in the world. There's a lot of conflicts, whether it be the Ukraine war, the tensions in the Middle East, and the tensions in South Asia with regard to occupied Jammu and Kashmir. We've seen that there was a talk of Islamophobia and how there's a rising trend. Of course, we've also seen that in this General Assembly session, there was a walkout when the Israeli Prime Minister came to address, which shows that the majority of the world powers, majority of the world countries, they want a peace in the world and an inclusive environment. At the same time, we see Israel and a certain country in South Asia, I'll name it India, and they both having their hegemonic designs, they're having their own narratives, with India having its Hindutva ideology, which is an epitome of radicalism and extremism. How do you comment on that, with the whole world siding on peace efforts and efforts for justice, equality, and there's the other faction in the world that focuses on its radical ideologies? Mr. Wajih Abbasi.
Yeah. Yes. The as far as Israeli actions in the Middle East are concerned, the basic in international politics, the basic issue is always your power. You have to have deterrence to stop your enemy to taking any punishable any action against yourself. Unfortunately, the Arab world doesn't have that deterrence. Initially, when the Israel state was formed in 1948, initially Egypt and Syria and Jordan tried to give some deterrence to try to stop them. But in 1979, the Egyptian leadership decided that it can't do that. And later on, the other countries like Syria and then Iraq showed some sort of resilience, but those countries have been destroyed. And now you don't have any deterrence power in the Middle East. Most of the other countries are actually not able to stand against Israel. You don't even see any statements against Israeli action sometime. So that is the weakness, is the main crime of the Palestinian leadership and the Arab world. You can blame the United States, you can blame the European countries, you can blame anybody, but the basic fact is that the Arab leadership, the Arab countries don't have the force to retaliate.
You're saying putting our house in order first.
Yes. So you know, when there is a saying in English, they say that when you strike a king, strike to kill. Unfortunately, by the force of the streets, just street sentiments, the people follow street sentiments, and like what Hamas did on October 7, or the Hezbollah is doing from Lebanon. They're just trying to pick Israel, and they got the punishment. Now, if you want to counter Israel in the Middle East, you will have to build your own economic power, you will have to build your technological power, you have to build your military power to create a deterrence. As long as the Arabs don't have a deterrence against Israel, Israel will keep on killing them. And you know, Israel is on path to genocide the Palestinians. They don't accept even the existence of Palestinians. If you know the Zionistic ideology, they don't actually consider that there were any people in the Palestine at the time of their arrival there. So they don't accept the existence of Palestinians, and they are bent upon destroying or eliminating them. Totally cleansing the state of Palestine, or the Palestine from the Palestinians, and they have been doing it for last 100 years. Since the Balfour Declaration, they have been constantly doing it. Now, in those 100 years, the Arab world, or the Palestinians, or those Arabs who support Palestinians, they haven't been able to create a power equivalent to Israel, or equivalent to those that can threaten the supporters of Israel.
Mr. Wajih Abbasi, with regards to that, don't you think it would be a responsibility on the international community itself and the international systems such as the United Nations and bodies that are meant to ensure there's peace in the world to also take action, and of course the facilitators of such aggressors and oppressors? Don't you think there's some collective responsibility on them with regards to morality as well?
Unfortunately, the international politics doesn't have a morality. These are just, you know, they just talk about it. As long as the one country is powerful enough to do the things it likes, it does it. And the Israelis have the power, and they have the backing of the United States. Whatever they do, the United States backs them. You can have one little statements here or there, but United States backs them always. They give them financial support, they give them military support, they give them technological support, and they give them all the diplomatic support. And that support is always with them. The European countries, most of the European countries now, you know, they say that there should be two state settlement in Middle East, but they don't put enough pressure on Israel to accept that two-state solution. And you know, even in among Palestinians, most of the Hamas people, or most of the people in Lebanon who are fighting against Israel, they, you know, this slogan last year when this Gaza war started, the slogan was Palestine, from river to sea, Palestine will be free. I mean, that was negation of the existence of Israel. There was no two-state solution. There was rejection of two-state solution. So even the Palestinian streets, the Gaza, those who are fighting against Israel in Gaza, in South Lebanon, they don't accept the two-state solution. Israel doesn't accept or doesn't want to materialize that two-state solution, which it had accepted at the Oslo summit. So when there is the international community, the European nations also are not putting enough pressure on Israel to accept that two-state solution. So as long as there is no two-state solution, such type of killings and the counter killings and these sort of things will continue, and there will be no peace, and that will continue.
In regards to that, I'd also move towards Mr. Javed Jadoon with regards to the Prime Minister's address. We'll also cover the dynamics regarding Israel and, of course, what's happening in the Middle East. But before that, we'll cover our first topic. And Mr. Javed Jadoon, I'd also like you to comment, since the Prime Minister also talked about inclusivity and climate change. When we talk about the developing countries and, of course, equitable development, we see that there's countries in African states, we see that there's countries in South Asia, and there are countries in Central Asia as well that bear the brunt of climate change, even though they're not as much contributing to the carbon emissions. With regards to that, how do you comment on inclusivity and the global phenomena of climate change going hand in hand, and of course equitable development as well?
Yes, please allow me, before I comment on the climate change, I would like to make a few comments of what was said about the ongoing situation in Gaza and Israel's prowess to pound Gaza and Lebanon as well. I think let us not be delusional that Arab world is lacking deterrence. The deterrence comes from the military power and the economic power. And in this particular case, the Arab world is not pitted against Israel. They are pitted against the Americans. Americans are supplying $3 billion weapons per annum, and this program is expanded to 10 years. Most of the most advanced military hardware comes from the United States, and even this war is being funded, being financed, and being supplied by the Americans. According to the Stockholm-based think tank SIPRI, America accounts for 69% of the weapon systems being supplied to Israel. So I mean, talking about Arab countries lacking deterrence, what kind of a deterrence they can pose? Do they have to become the nuclear powers to become a deterrent state so that they can stop the Israelis committing the war crimes and pounding Gaza and Lebanon without any impunity? I think it's the Americans, because when I mentioned that French proposed a ceasefire for 21 days, what happened? Because they lacked will, they didn't want it to go through. It was just the kind of a public posturing, and it is kind of a posturing which they wanted the Arab world. Look, we are trying and striving to help out a ceasefire in Lebanon and Gaza. Now, coming back to your point, the climate change, I think Pakistan is among the sufferers as far as the climate change is concerned, because Pakistan is not among the biggest polluters. I mean, in the neighborhood you see is the Indians. The Indians are polluting. They are the biggest polluters in this region in South Asia. And along with the Indians, the Chinese as well. So I think Pakistan is at the receiving end. So raising the voice at the international forums about the impact of climate change, because we have seen what happened to Pakistan, the flooding in Sindh and Punjab as well. It cost us multi-billion dollars economy, and we are still struggling to overcome those, the effects of the flooding in Sindh, particularly every year when the monsoons come. Our own making as well, because we have not been able to put in place a system where we could deal effectively with the floodings, which have become a norm in monsoon. So I think as far as the climate change impacts are concerned, of course, Pakistan is at the receiving end and is the sufferer, not causing the pollution as far as the climate change is concerned in this particular region. Less rains, even Pakistan, as I said, is responsible because deforestation is one of the biggest issues in Pakistan, which is causing very sudden, the weather patterns taking place in the country. Some months which see very heavy rains, and then there are long spells of dry months as well. So climate change, of course, Pakistan's economy really can't the devastating impact of climate change. So it was very close to the heart of the Prime Minister, and it's Pakistan's among the biggest concerns Pakistan has as far as the global forums are concerned.
Right. Dr. Salma Malik, I'd like your comments as well. When we talk about the Prime Minister's address, he focused on Afghanistan and, of course, the issue of cross-border terrorism emanating from Afghanistan. And at the same time, the Prime Minister also said how there needs and how Pakistan desires for Afghanistan to be stable. And with regards to that, he also said that there should be a more inclusiveness of the women population of Afghanistan in the political process. I'd like you to comment on that, and as well as the Prime Minister, he reiterated a call for access to peace and justice. He particularly stated that the weak are not voiceless. How would you comment on that statement, particularly when in regards to the Prime Minister not just being a voice of the Pakistani people, not just being a voice for the Muslims, but the Prime Minister being a voice for all the weak that are being oppressed all around the globe?
The weak are not voiceless is very important point that has been raised because what Pakistan is demanding is from the UN the rule-based norms and order with which Pakistan has always remained associated to the UN process, whether it be the Palestine issue or it be the Kashmir issue. The 17 odd resolutions that Pakistan has had vis-a-vis Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and the dispute that has evolved since the 1940s, Pakistan has always remained true to the cause that despite the fact that Pakistan is at a disadvantage, despite the fact that the UN system is not working as ideally as it should, we believe in that. And also the fact that UN was made as a forum where the weak and the voiceless would be heard. The fact that the League of Nations failed to address the major problems of the world in the interwar period and after the Second World War, then we see the emergence of UN as a champion of global peace, security, and stability. And it has also talked about women, peace, and security. It has talked about youth, peace, and security, other than other aspects of security and conflict. So Pakistan has always been very, very strongly wedded to the UN process, and it feels that if there is one forum which can provide deliverance to those who are not being heard on any other fora, that is and that should ideally be the UN. And there should be reforms and empowerment as a result of that. And Pakistan has supported reform agenda in the UN on the basis of these factors only, because the Kashmir cause and the Palestine cause is very dear to us. Now, about your question on Afghanistan, again, Pakistan is extremely concerned about the human rights violations in Afghanistan, the suppression of women in Afghanistan, and a gradual and steady growth in the repression that is happening by the Afghan regime against women in Afghanistan. Despite the assurances the Afghan regime in its earlier months in office had given that we are going to gradually open up more space for the women rather than become more restrictive. So Pakistan has raised that point. Pakistan's main concern with Afghanistan is its support to the Tehreek-e-Taliban, to the anti-Pakistani elements, and the Afghan regime, instead of cooperating with Pakistan, has now made it a moot point to hold a grudge with Pakistan on that point because the TTP act as an asset for them. But the fact that Pakistan has time and again hammered to the Afghans in bilateral conversations, informal conversations about better situation and better rights for women of Afghanistan is a fact that cannot be understated, and we have been very vocal about it. This is a point that many other countries have also, Pakistan has conveyed through the other countries to the Afghans. But the Taliban are also very defiant because they are outside any international system. And the fact that Pakistan also makes this case from time to time that we should make them part of the conversation, formal conversation, so that they feel that they have to perform according to some international norms, and their acceptance in the world category or in the world committee would be based on those norms as on fulfilling those agenda and fulfilling those aspects, doing better record on the human rights and several other factors. But the world doesn't tend to see Afghanistan in that picture because it's not relevant anymore. If tomorrow's situation becomes very bad in Afghanistan, which is a negative security guarantee, again the US would find itself gravitating towards Afghanistan, and Pakistan will once again be drawn into a vicious circle for which Pakistan has, after a lot of difficulty, been able to come out. Yet we are not out of the shadow of the post 9/11 quote unquote war on terror, because the ramifications of the war on terror are still very loud and clear for Pakistan. We are facing the brunt of the war on terror. The TTP remains very much there. After going to Afghanistan, it didn't really stop them by being located in Afghanistan to stop attacking Pakistan. Now they're doing it within the territory. And they find a very easy sanctuary in Afghanistan as a result of that. Is something that world powers are not really warming up to. They don't understand how difficult it is for a country as Pakistan, which is at the same time also supporting a huge population of Afghan nationals who are here as asylum seekers, who are here as nationals, who are here as refugees, who are here as aliens even. And except for the fact that a lot of lip service goes into this process, and anytime Pakistan tries to push the Afghan nationals back to Afghanistan, there's a lot of negative press that we have to face both within home as well as outside. Technically speaks for the fact that the world has very little concern for the plight of what is happening to Pakistan's eastern side. The United Nations mission on women, various other human rights missions, women rights missions that were operating in Afghanistan remained confined to the containers and to the bunkers through which they were operating, and they were as alien to what actually was happening at the grassroots level in Afghanistan as they would be. But it suits them to come out with reports that talk about poor treatment of the Afghan women. But what they don't understand is that the brass tacks, the heat of everything that is happening is being felt by Pakistan. I think the speech overall by the Pakistani Prime Minister has touched all the major issues, including the traditional, regional, and non-traditional aspects. And most of those issues are the ones which are of prime global concern. Thank you.
Right. Right, Dr. Salma, of course, those are very important points that you raised with regards to the Prime Minister's address and the issue of Afghanistan, as Pakistan stands in a very complex position. Of course, it desires and has supported Afghanistan in all of its issues, but at the same time, Pakistan has its own challenges that it needs to address as well. And Pakistan, even though it is facing and dealing with its challenges, it still has and always will try to support Afghanistan in whatever possible way they can. With regards to that, we'll move towards our second segment. Of course, it focuses on the Middle East. I'm talking about Hassan Nasrallah's assassination by Israel. Of course, we know Hassan Nasrallah was the chief of Hezbollah, which was the main group in Lebanon that was showing resistance to Israel's occupation and its hegemonic designs. If you go into the backdrop a little, Hassan Nasrallah became the leader of Hezbollah in 1992. Back in 1982, he formed Hezbollah to resist Israel's invasion of Lebanon. Under his leadership, he evolved Hezbollah from a militant group into a dominant political and military force. During Israel's genocide of Palestinians, Hezbollah launched multiple attacks against Israel in support of the Palestinians. However, he was killed in an Israeli airstrike, as confirmed by different media outlets. And of course, with regards to that, Wajih Abbasi, I'd like your comment when we talk about the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah by Israel. What do you see it having an impact on the Middle East? Do you see the war escalating from now on?
Yeah, of course, these type of actions and killing of earlier they killed the Ismail Hania, the Hamas leader in Tehran. he was mysteriously killed, and but many people say that it was Israelis.
Speculations.
The Israelis killed him, and they have been taking action, such type of action against different Iranian generals also. Like the commander Brigadier Suleiman was killed in Iraq some years back. And they've done it to the Hassan Nasrallah. So, you know, when you take away leadership of your opposing parties, then more extremist type of leaders emerge. It's always this case that you can't, you know, you don't eliminate resistance by killing the leaderships. There is a leadership with which you can talk to, which you can hold negotiations, or with which you can deal. If you eliminate that leadership, then the new leadership which will emerge to replace that leader, that will be more extremist. And it will be difficult for them actually to negotiate with you, or you to have any sort of dealing with you, because people will then call them traitors. So, when you eliminate the leaders, you mess up the things. So, that's what probably it will happen to Lebanon also, or to Hezbollah-Israeli relationship also. There will be no chances of any I can't say rapprochement, because you know that's out of the question probably there, but any sort of dealings, any sort of de-escalation, any sort of ceasefire will become difficult for the post Hassan Nasrallah leadership of Hezbollah. But again, you know, when I was talking about, and that also previously also, you know, it's Israel is just doing all these action with impunity. There is no force to counter it. These you know, these are ragtag groups like the Hamas, like this Hezbollah, like Yemeni's, or that, you know, they don't have that power.
So you're asking for a concerted effort to deal with Israel?
Yeah, you have to have a matching force if you want to.
Such as the OIC or the Arab
Islamic world, or some sort of matching force. It may be political, it may be, you know, in 73 Arab-Israeli war, there was some, of course, that was, but that one-sided, as these wars are. That was action by the Egyptians and Israel and the Syrians and all that. They took Israel to some extent, but there was a diplomatic effort. There was the oil export was by the Muslim countries were banned, and it created an impact outside. It was the prices went up, and there was hue and cry in the world. You don't see that even that sort of actions in these years. For quite many years now, Israel is going to bomb Syria, is going to bomb the Lebanese, is going to bomb Gaza, and I frankly fear that they will be in near future. They will be they will do the same sort of genocidal actions against people in the West Bank, because I frankly believe that the Israelis don't want the Palestinians on Palestine. They don't want them.
They want them displaced.
Yeah, they don't. They want them to be pushed outside Palestine.
With what they're doing, it's like they not only want them displaced, they want them cleansed off the face of the earth. With regards to that, I'd also like to include comments from Mr. Javed Jadoon with regards to what he thinks the Hezbollah needs to do from now on. Do you think there needs to be restraint or have a more aggressive approach?
Yeah, I think it's a very serious blow to Hezbollah, because Hassan Nasrallah was their leader for the last 32 years. He was very charismatic. People loved him, and he was very liked a person in Lebanon. And finding his replacement would be kind of a difficult situation, because some of the top commanders have also been martyred in the past couple of days. And there's now definitely a vacuum of leadership. But that void or vacuum would be filled by younger people, and they would be unpredictable. And as I said, Hassan Nasrallah was the leader of Hezbollah for the last 32 years. So the Israelis knew his strengths and weaknesses, and he was very predictable. But now, since they have eliminated most of the top commanders and Hassan Nasrallah gone from the scene, the void is going to be filled by the younger leadership, and they would be extremely unpredictable. And the fight will continue. Fight will not stop. Hezbollah will continue to put up a very brave resistance, and because they have got no option left, Israelis are pounding the civilian areas and killing the civilians as well. So, as far as Hezbollah is concerned, the people see them as their protectors. So, Hezbollah has the responsibility. They feel it is their responsibility to protect the civilians, and they definitely have a very formidable arsenal of state-of-the-art weapons as well. They have got long-range missiles, ground-to-ground rockets, which they are using even today, and they would be using more lethal force against the Israelis. So I think there's quite a serious danger that there is going to be further escalation, and until the Americans and the Europeans, they do want to de-escalate the situation and in a meaningful way. So the answer to your question is Hezbollah as a military force will be a very potent force even in the coming days, months, and years, and they really can't be eliminated. Americans have not been able to subdue the Ghazans, who do not have the kind of weapons and the organizational skills and the training as the Hezbollah has. So if they have not been able to suppress the Ghazans, they won't be able to suppress the Hezbollah in Lebanon as well. And Hezbollah definitely has the support of the people in southern Lebanon and Bekaa Valley. So I believe that the situation is going to worsen.
Of course, things are on a tipping point, and it is up to the world community to take notice of that, to take cognizance of that, and of course take action against all these oppressors that are carrying out injustices, genocide and atrocities with impunity. With that, we'll conclude today's show. Of course, we talked about Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif's address at the United Nations and all the different topics the Prime Minister's address covered. In the second segment, we talked about Hassan Nasrallah's assassination by Israel, who was the commander of Hezbollah. I'd like to thank all of our guests, Javed Jadoon, senior journalist, Dr. Salma Malik, foreign affairs expert, and Wajih Abbasi, analyst. I'd like to thank you all for your time and being part of the conversation. See you same time tomorrow. Till then.